Good evening and welcome to the Dusty Feet. And as you can see in the background, it's different, right? So we'll just get that out of the way right now. Yes, it's different, but that is real. That's not green screen. That's real. Okay. The other one was green screen. So that's why I had the same office no matter where I moved. And my room always looked the same. But we're getting ready to move and that kind of stuff. So this is a peek into the future. This is not exactly what it's going to look like, but those are involved and you're getting a glimpse into the future. So one of those things that we have coming up on the Dusty Feet. So that said, don't forget if you want to subscribe, click the bell to get reminded and future videos and other people's videos. Yeah. Okay. Great. So tonight we are on Branches on the Vine homework series, part 5, Kingdom of Blessing. Okay. And I hope you did your homework because it'll be valuable in doing it. If you haven't seen this, if you're seeing it after the live, stop, go link in the description, click, watch the video, okay, and come back. That way, then at least there's some context and talk to what we're doing. If you're live and you haven't done the homework, then you get to listen, then you go back and let's do it afterwards because I'm going to exhort you to do that anyways, okay? So here we go. And as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place where we can safely explore the endless ways of God and the interconnection of His creation, where belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here, environment of grace and love. So here we go on the Dusty Feet. And so, okay, so let's start. Well, we're going to go with these. Before we begin, actually, pre-deal, you know that this is the blessings, old school name, the Beatitudes. Okay, and we're going to wrap around. It's not just about these 9 verses; it's about what builds up to them, and that'll be part of the fun stuff with this. But I wanted to go over something because we're going to get into context. We're going to get into context and people and all those kind of things. We're going to talk about it. So when you're looking at Scripture, especially when we're looking at Jesus's words, Yeshua's teachings, anything has to do with him, where we have 4 accountings of that they're each told from a different perspective, okay? And right now we're watching Matthew's perspective, okay? But each of them has things, and things will be different, okay? They're not the same. And let's take a peek at something just for fun, to take a peek and just get what we talk about sometimes with this. So here's the blessings. Matthew's on the left, Luke's accounting's on the right, okay? Those gaps are there, as you can tell, because there's no verses there. So Luke's accounting doesn't even cover all of these. And as you can see, the ones in yellow, Luke's accounting of 2 of them are reverse order of the other one, and they skip the one in the middle. So I guess the question is, one we think about, does that bother you? Does it bother you that they're different? That we're going to discuss way down the road. Okay. Actually, I think my brother Jim and I will probably tackle that on a renew or something. I'm not sure, but at least on a red string. But we want to talk about those kind of things that are part of Scripture, and what are our expectations of Scripture? Is that fair? So what is our expectations, and what do we want Scripture to give us? Okay, or what are we expecting to take away from it? Bit of both, right? And I think that's worthy to talk about. So let's start. I have 4 clips to listen to, and we'll listen to a Mackie clip, and then we'll talk about it, because it worked last time, and I liked it, where we pulled out the clips and did it because it gave us a real launching point to step from. And then if you've watched the video, then it's a reminder. Like we're talking about, the clip is not in context. You understand? In other words, the whole story is the context. So if you don't go listen to the whole teaching, you're missing something. You're going to miss something. So again, I highly suggest that you do that. But with that said, let's listen to this first clip that Mackie has to say.
Who is Jesus saying these 9 blessings to, and on what occasion? I guess that's 2 questions. That's 2 questions. So who is Jesus talking to? And in what setting or what context is he doing that? And asking that question actually might highlight something that's very, very common. These 3 chapters of Matthew 5, 6, and 7, they're the most famous collection of Jesus' teachings. They're called the Sermon on the Mount in church history. And many people who primarily see Jesus as a moral teacher tend to lift these 3 chapters out of their context in Matthew and treat it like a little pamphlet. This is like the ethics of Jesus in summary. This is ethics light with Jesus, or something like that. And if you do that, I'm pretty convinced you'll really misunderstand what Jesus is trying to do in these 3 chapters, because Matthew has placed them. He's placed chapter 5 after what chapter? And there's method to that madness, right? There's method to it. Because ethical teaching was one of the things that Jesus did, but only trying to flesh out the implications and how we should respond to what his core message was all about. And if you were here last week, we explored that. What is Jesus' core message? You would for sure hear him talking about this on any given day that you heard him teach. It's about the kingdom. Look, I even left the words up from last week. So when you think of Jesus, think of the kingdom. Because look at chapter 4, Matthew 4. I know we're going to focus on 5, but just remember chapter 4. Look at chapter 4, verse 17. Jesus comes onto the public stage, and Matthew, thank you, Matthew, he has summarized the whole message of Jesus in one little sentence to make sure you don't miss the main idea. What's it about? Matthew 4, verse 17. Hey, repent. Everybody, pay attention. Turn around. The kingdom of heaven has come near. So this is what we explored last week. The kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven, is the storyline of the whole Bible, and about how humans have both rebelled and ruined ourselves, each other, and God's world. And God has set in line a whole set of promises in the story of the Old Testament scriptures to lead up to this promise that he would one day come among his people as king and reclaim his rightful rule and reign over his people. And Jesus claimed that that's what was happening, and it was happening in himself and in what he was saying and in what he was doing. And he was utterly convinced that it was good news. It was really good news.
It was really good news. And so we're already starting this. You see, the context piece. I liked how he wrapped up and said that chapter 5 comes after chapter 4. We often in Scripture will pull something out. We're notorious in the letters later on in the book of grabbing things out and not reading the context of the story. And to be fair with Jesus, with Yeshua's words, you need to take all 4 Gospels and lay them on top of each other. When I was a kid, we had Encyclopedia Britannicas, and there were sections of them occasionally that had, like, for instance, where the frog was, right? they had clear overlays. And the first one laid down, and the other one laid on top of it, another one laid on top of it, another laid on top of it. And they would add or fill in for the whole frog. It would tell you different things about its nervous system and organs and different things. And they all stacked up. But when they were stacked is that's when you saw the story. The story is in the stacking of the pages. The story is in the stack of this. So if you don't take everything that's said in context, especially to his life, because these 4 are basically various perspective accountings of his life, okay? Different perspective accountings of his life, as we saw with the comparison. So they all need to go together. So when we go and we pull these pieces out, I think it's important that we remember that, okay? So the big question he asks, and he asks this from the beginning, and I think it's a question that you need to ask for the entire scripture. I think that goes from Genesis all the way to Revelation, including Revelation, is who is he talking to and what's the setting? Who is the author talking to and what's the setting? In this particular one, Yeshua is speaking, so it's to him. Jesus is talking, and so who's he talking to and where are we? Like we saw in 4, where we've come out of the roundabout of Galilee, right? And we've been along the sea's edge, right? And they've developed this crowd, and this crowd has started to follow, okay? But let's be real. Think about it now. This isn't about 1,000 people following him everywhere he goes. They have homes. They have stuff. The day goes, they go back to their homes. Jesus may move on to the next village or the next town, and the group would come over and word would spread, and there were those that went. But this group here, so at this point now we have a rather large group together, and then they go and they're going to listen. We're going to talk about the group makeup in a little bit and how that plays out. I like the point where Mackie was talking about that we want to pull these out and make this little moral statement piece on it. And I think we're missing the point that everything that Jesus talked about is in the context of the kingdom. So if you're trying to look at something and you're looking to pull something out of it, that includes his parables. If there's not a kingdom message in there or a kingdom purpose in those, then maybe we're misapplying what the parable is saying, okay? Because it needs to fall into this. This particular one in the blessings, it's abundantly clear. So we kind of want to remember that, and let's keep that in mind as we walk forward, okay? And those context questions that we're going to continue to ask all the way through Matthew and all the way through the rest of the time that we do. That's what context. That's in the core, right? So let's go and listen to clip 2 and see what we hear.
Then Jesus goes around the whole region, right? Itinerant teacher kind of thing. Teaching, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, healing, and then who's coming to him? So he's got fishermen in tow, right? He's like unlikely bunch of fishermen. And then who else is starting to follow Jesus now? What does it say? Look at verse 24. News about him spread, and what kinds of people are flocking to Jesus? Sick people, people whose bodies don't work, people with just pain and limbs that don't work, people who are oppressed by spiritual evil. They're called crazy or lunatics by everybody else. They're having seizures, the paralyzed. And in this setting, this is Roman society. We thank them because the seedbed of whatever, democracy and that whole philosophy of politics, and more people had clean water than ever before because of the Romans and the aqueducts and the road systems. And it was, at the same time, the most cutthroat society you could ever possibly imagine. And there's no welfare, there's no food stamps, right? If you are one of these people, where do you live? What part of town do you live? You live in the slums, and you are most certainly pushed to the absolute margins. You're poor, your subsistence living, day labor. And these are the people, Matthew makes it a point to tell us, who flock to Jesus. And what do these crowds do? Look at verse 25, chapter 4. These large crowds of all these sick, hurting, poor fishermen, farmers, day laborers, they flock to Jesus from all these regions. Crowds of them from Galilee, Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, all across the Jordan. Among all these crowds, what are these sick, hurting people doing? What do they do? What's the last sentence of chapter 4? They follow him. So we have fishermen following Jesus when he calls them, and then we have these crowds of sick, hurting people who, in the eyes of Roman society, they're the losers, they're the unimportant, the insignificant. They're the ones flocking to Jesus. And among those crowds, a whole bunch of those are following him too. Now, what's our question to ask of the 9 blessings? What's our question? So who's Jesus talking to and in what setting? Chapter 5. When Jesus saw the crowds, and you now know who makes up those crowds, he went to a mountainside and he sat down. His disciples came to him. Now, who's that? So I think when we see that word, if you're familiar with the Gospels, you might think, oh, the 12, right? He has these 12 close disciples. Now, does the circle of the 12 disciples exist yet? No, you're reading, this doesn't happen until chapter 10, right? So 4 of them are in tow now, the 4 fishermen. They're going to be part of the 12. But so who are the disciples? What's a disciple? It's somebody who follows Jesus. Who's following Jesus? Loads of people. Loads of people. And primarily, Matthew says, what's the makeup of these disciples who are coming from the crowds? What's the makeup? I'm trying to overemphasize the point to make it crystal clear. Fishermen, sick, hurting, poor people. So you have Jesus on a mountainside who sits down, and he has just huge crowds of people who have come out of even larger crowds because they see something in Jesus and his good news of the kingdom. They're all in for him. And what does he say to a huge crowd of disciples who are unimportant and insignificant and hurting and sick and just scraping by? He says these 9 blessings. These 9 blessings.
Okay, so you have this makeup of this group, and you go, if today, right, if you want to become an influential, if you want to impact your community, and you want to impact the group around you, you would go to, say, the Chamber of Commerce, right, and introduce yourself. The Rotary Club. Maybe the local religious leaders have a group, right? And then especially a political side of the equation, whichever dominates in the region, you would want to go to and pitch your spiel because you want to get the community's support, right? And that's what we would do today in our Greco-Roman based history, right? And what we do. And so we're going to see that just like the blessings, Jesus' approach is upside down. Okay, it's upside down. Because you would think, hey, if we're going to do this, why don't I start with the leadership we have, and he can point out what they need to correct. Now, that's one of his points to do that, but he doesn't. So there's interesting questions to ask in that. And the fact that when it says disciples, because this is a post story, right? Matthew's writing about it, and he's calling them something, okay? And it's his term to use, and we have called Matthew a disciple, right? So we do this. So follow me on this one. He makes the call. In other words, he's naming them. He doesn't say there's a crowd around Jesus and there's 4 of us, his disciples, okay? It's not what it says, okay? So I think maybe we could possibly really think about what a disciple is, okay? And what we think that is, because he's calling them that. Okay. And what did that mean then in that context with those people? Okay. I kind of had this picture in this when he has this, is that this group is coming out, and it's a large group at this point for this particular day in this particular discussion. And he and the group is sitting there, and he goes up on a hillside, and then the other group kind of fills in. There's another group that kind of separates itself from them, kind of pushes to the front. That's a pretty smaller but good sized group. And then I'll vote that the four were maybe right up close, okay, in this setup, because he's getting so he can look at the crowd and do this. I laughed that it's probably the backward of my personal history in Baptist churches, that you fill it from the back to the front, and so if you're late, we're late. Jackie, we're late. I got to sit up front. I don't want to sit up front. Hurry up. I don't want to. And okay, rather than there, it's the reverse. That you want to be at the foot. You want to be at the front. You want to be there at the foot of the master, right? And number two, I would guess there's probably some motivation that he is going through and teaching and preaching as he goes. This hit me not too long ago, and I wondered if this is or isn't the case. I don't know, okay? But Martin Luther's speech, I Have a Dream, it wasn't a single speech. It was told many places. It's famous for a place. But there's a speech there. It was spoken in a church here in Savannah. And if you go on one of the trolley tours, which is really cool, sometimes, depending on who the conductor is, they'll play a clip of him with part of that speech. But it's not at that speech. It's when he's saying it in a church here, and that had been recorded. And so you wonder if he said this more than once, and Matthew is just annotating that day. We don't know, because you would think things were repeated. You're there for a lot of years. Because trust me, if we only have those stories, those few stories told one time, the parables, that kind of stuff, we're done in like a day and a half, right? Maybe, okay, I'll give you a week, right? And then we're done, right? But if he repeated those stories, then that would be repeated throughout time, because he's sharing that with new groups of followers and new groups of people that are coming as Mackie talked about, an itinerant teacher. He's walking by, and he's walking to these villages, walking to these cities, and sharing this particular part. So we get these little pieces, which I think is an interesting point to consider. So, and the fact that that the disciples are not the 12, they're not there yet, and this group is considered, Matthew's calling them disciples. So they're already starting to follow the teachings and belief and trying to understand this new words that they're hearing. In this particular one, it is going to be upside down, okay? Which is neat, okay? And it'll be, it gets cool. So let's watch the third clip, and we'll be getting into how that is going to affect this group that's hearing this and the perspective that it brings. I think you'll enjoy this.
These 9 blessings. And in that setting, words like this, they're electric. That's what they are, right? Nobody's familiar with what Jesus is saying here, that they're hearing this good news of the kingdom for the first time. And it's positively electric, what he's doing. And it's actually, I think it's really hard for us to recreate what that would have been like, to hear Jesus amidst all these crowds and to hear him say something like this. I don't know how to recreate it, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try. And so as I was thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, I was trying to scan my memory, like what? Oh, yes, exactly. So I have a friend who introduced me to the work of these 2 British artists They're sculpture artists who do big installations and so on. Tim Noble and Sue Webster. I had never heard of them before, like 3 weeks ago or whatever, and maybe some of you have, in which case don't nudge your neighbor and say, oh, I know what he's going to do. So Tim Noble and Sue Webster. And what they've done a lot of different things, but about 10 years ago, they did a whole series of works and installations and sculptures. And I'll show you one. Here's the first one here. So you walk into a gallery show, and you walk into a room that is dark, and you'll see a table, an old abused picnic table with all of these beer cans and Coca-Cola and Pepsi cans, and it's weird, and you're like, oh, it's one of these art shows, It's like dark and offensive, but no one's going to tell me what it means and whatever. But this isn't offensive. Yeah, you're like, oh, it's kind of, and then you get closer and you're like, oh, everything's shot through with BBs. Someone just shot this thing through with BB guns. Everything's destroyed or whatever. And then in the corner of the room, a spotlight turns on and shines on the table, and then you see the silhouette on the wall behind it. Come on. That's awesome. That's the coolest thing in the world, right? So the tall boy has become one of the World Trade Centers. I mean, that's really amazing. Anyway, so look at that. So you're like, so what happened there? There was a moment of surprise. What's going on in this piece? It's about perception. What you perceived was trash actually can become the vehicle of meaning and of significance and beauty. The moment there's this surprise light that reframes everything of what you thought was there in the first place. You walk into the next gallery room, and you see literally a heap of trash all over the ground. And, whatever social commentary you want to make, trash and McDonald's. I don't, whatever you want to make of that. And same kind of thing, corner of the room, the light goes on. And it's people who actually look like they're sleeping in the trash, but then you realize, of course, the silhouette is made of the trash. And then you read the title of the piece. And then you're thinking of Portland, right? The enormous amount of young homeless people who live on the streets of Portland. And then all of a sudden, like the juxtaposition of trash with these people, it gets you thinking about perception, doesn't it? It gets you thinking about how you see people who don't have homes and who live out in the open in our cities, and how you perceive them, how you think of them. It both is the setting where they live, but it also makes you rethink. It's just this surprise reversal. You walk into another room, and you see these odd-looking objects made of chair pieces and toilet paper. I mean, what on earth? You're like, what on earth is that? And then same thing, lights go out, spotlight, and it's, what on earth? Who would think of that? Tim Noble and Sue Webster, apparently. Now, I don't know them, and I haven't even read any interviews with them. I just think it's the coolest thing I've ever seen, and I wanted to show it to you, right? So that's one reason why I'm showing this to all of you. But so I actually can only infer what they're going for. I can talk about, at beholding the work, its effect on me. That what immediately strikes you is these works are all about surprise and this reversal of your perception. What you thought were things that are discarded, what you thought was chaos or trash or garbage, from a certain angle, and when the right surprise light shines upon it, the trash becomes this vehicle of beauty and meaning and significance. And the same surprise, that each of those 3 times was like, whoa, holy cow, from that angle I never saw. That's, I think, an inkling. You have an inkling of what Jesus is accomplishing when he says these words. Who's he talking to? He's talking to sick, like hurting, day laborers, subsistence living. They're not important. Nobody cares what these people think about the future of Judea and the Roman Empire, right? That's who's flocking to Jesus by the crowds. And to them, he pronounces these blessings. And they're charged because the things that he's promising to them are things like the kingdom of God and inheriting the earth. And that they will be the ones who will be able to see and meet God in a personal and intimate way. And they are the ones who will be called God's family, God's children. It's just reversal, surprise. And what I love also about these works, of course, is that they're just using pre-existing materials and arranging them in these unique ways, and then once the surprise hits, it's like, oh, I never saw that coming. And this is exactly what Jesus is doing. And this all revolves around the word blessed, what Jesus is doing with this word blessed. So we'll hone in on this, then we'll come back up, and then we'll work our way through the 9 and just sit at the feet of the Master and have our minds blown by what.
Okay. So, there's a lot in this. These words, I like to use the words, these are electric. They're going to cause something to jump, move, alter its state, shock at something. Again, I'll go back to the frog. You were dissecting a frog going at it, and you put 2 electrodes on the muscles, and you could make the muscles twitch, right? With the current, this is going to make people move. Okay, this is going to have a point. He talks about perspective. So let me go from light to heavy. Okay, we'll go from light to heavy. As my experience as a soccer referee, we're on the pitch and we're going in, especially all my big games, all the big college games, the pro games, those kind of pieces. We had assessors, people that were there that watched us, and they were there to mentor us, critique us, and help us become better referees and deal with the things that we dealt with. So one of the masters at that was a Dr. Don Wilbur, and he was a master at this. And he does it at the international level. He does the FIFA mentoring for our top referees in the United States. I think he's still doing it today. Joe Macknick is another one of these guys that does this. And what they do is you'll be in a game and the game's over, right? In other words, you've made your calls, you've done your piece, you've had your game, there's a referee crew, you've debriefed, you talked about things, and then you're going to sit down with the assessor and they're going to pull up the tape, whether we're doing it remotely, he's in one place where they were watching it online, or whether we're there watching the video, and we play it. So then we talked, he has notes on what we had and a card we had and that kind of stuff. So we're recalling what's going on in the game. And I'd say, okay. And so he'd say, so tell me what you saw here, especially if it was for a PK or a card or something like that. So I'd tell him what I recall, what I saw. And one of his best things, okay, based on what you told me that you saw and the position that you were, I can see why you came to that choice. However, if you got a different view, do you think you'd change your mind? Okay. And I was suckering up before. I mean, just, Bob, shut up and say, it's quite possible that I could. And then we'd look at it from a different perspective. And it was normally a TV perspective or the camera perspective, what was going on, that kind of stuff. So we were looking at a different angle, totally, of course. And I'd go, different perspective, I would or wouldn't have said, because sometimes it's not always about you were wrong. It says, could you look at it another way? And you go, yeah, it still happened that way. Maybe it wasn't as bad, or what are those choices and discussions that we have, but you're looking at this thing going, what would I do different if I knew something different in that perspective? What would I see if I was looked at somewhere else? Today, on TV today, you have the video assistants now that do that, right? They'll stop in the game, they'll do that, and then they go back up in the booth, and they'll do it on the field right there. Then the ref can go over, look at it, and say, well, was it a PK or not a PK, in the box, offside, all those little fun little things that they do. Because your perspective changes and you can move it. That's light, okay? So then he gets to the medium, okay? This is because I'm going to take you. So then he says, okay, these people are, the people that he's talking to isn't the people that you'd typically be going to say, I'm declaring my kingdom. I'm declaring that it's time. Messiah has come, Mashiach has come, and my kingdom will start and you're the core. Okay? You're the core. And in the blessings, he talks about what those are. They're it. And they're sitting there, and because they're expecting, okay, they've heard this before. We're going to get into that as well about the blessing part. But that it's a total surprise moment because this would rock them. They have never heard this before. They have never heard this before. Because nobody's seen them this way before. Nobody has stepped and seen them this way before. The closest thing that we get to this is actually Moses. When God was in there struggling the deal, and he's seeing the broken people that they are, and he's going, they're still your children, they're still your stuff. It's your reputation that's at stake. There's some wonderful things that Moses says because he's seeing what they can be. Okay, he knows that they're messed up. He knows they got problems, but what they can be. Okay, so but he's seeing them. Jesus is seeing them even more so. Okay, and he's bringing out these people that are going to inherit these things in the blessings and have granted to them, and they're not the ones you would think would be getting this. Okay. Another friend of mine, we were talking on Telegram, I think, about seeing, and he had posted. He said, "Seeing is seeing the object itself, and vision is seeing what it's capable of." Okay. That would be what the possibilities are. Okay. And I went back and said, can there be a third option? That's trying to see it from God's perspective, where I'm trying to position myself like Noble and Webster, right? And position myself to see them in their brokenness, the cityscape where it's shot up, it's a mess, it's ugly, and to sit and see it from God's perspective and says, look what I see. And it's amazing what I see in each of these pieces. And I want to see that. I want to see those. I don't know if we can. I don't know if it's possible. I don't. I know that it's something I would like to try and be cognizant and be aware of. Can I see through something? Okay. Past that point, past that vision, past the deal. Because again, I'm going to say it again, that if you could, it's a 16-year-old girl lying in a hospital bed with a neck support on, and she's a quadriplegic. She's broken. And everybody's going, her life is now shattered. She will never be the same again. And all the other negatives are going to go with that. And then people praying over her that she be healed and yada, yada, yada. And it doesn't happen. And then God turns the light perspective. And the light shines on the wall. And they go, what's JAF? I don't understand. I see this. I don't understand. But I see JAF on the wall. We get there. Okay? We get there. Harriet Todd, I mentioned her before. Simple lady, simple home, walking distance from the church. I don't know if she had a car. She might have had a little Ford or something, maybe. Now I'm trying to think about it. But simple lady. And then you turn and you see a cityscape and you go, that city, you can fill this whole city with the people that she has touched, the lives that she's touched because of the trickle effect, the butterfly effect of her involvement with me and her and what she's been willing to do. Meek. And that impact is absolutely phenomenal. Holocaust. 6+ million Jews slaughtered. You turn the picture, the light shines, and you see this silhouette, this outline. It looks like the land of Israel. It's the shape of the land of Israel. And you go, but that can't be because it doesn't exist. And then it does. To see that perspective, and what he's seeing there, he's looking at these broken, downtrodden, cast out people. He's going, you have no idea the value you have to me, to my Father, and the value you're going to have in my kingdom, in my community, is beyond measure to you. And he's going to declare these things to them. And I love that we get the opportunity, this electric, as Mackie put it, that Jesus is going to turn things upside down. And we still today don't get it. I look at our churches today. I look at the state of our communities, and I go, we are so off. It isn't even funny, because we're not building it that way. We're not encouraging that way. We're not supporting that way. We don't even want to look that way. And when you read this, it flips. And we're going to get to the end of this. On this one, we're going to address the particular term, blessed or blessing, as we watch this last clip from Mackie. And then we'll talk some more.
So, blessed. What on earth does it mean to say that someone's blessed? And not just in general. What does it mean for Rabbi Jesus to say it to this group of people at this time in this place? And this is where knowing a bit of history and Jewish backgrounds, I think, is really illuminating. Because Jesus is not the first teacher to talk like this and to teach like this, to pronounce blessings on people. He's taking a pre-existing idea and a pre-existing way of talking and a way of teaching. To go around as a rabbi or as a teacher pronouncing blessings on people has a long, long prehistory in Jewish culture that precedes Jesus. It's actually rooted in the Bible itself, in the Jewish scriptures. And there are loads of poems in the Hebrew scriptures themselves that begin by pronouncing blessings on people. Can you think of one? If you've ever read the book of Psalms, great collection of Hebrew prayers and poems, can you think of the first line of the very first psalm? How blessed is the person who doesn't act like a jerk, but who immerses themselves in the scriptures. That's how Psalm 1 begins. One of the greatest and longest poems in the whole book of Psalms, you'll just see how it begins right here. Blessed are those whose way is blameless, who walk according to the law of the Lord. Blessed are those who keep his statutes and seek him with all their heart. So we have this depiction here. When you say that someone's blessed, you're holding up this example, this model of first something you want to attain to. Here's something that in the Jewish community we hold as admirable, right? And we should strive for this, to be someone who's blameless, who immerses himself in Scripture. I'm seeking God with all my heart. They're blessed. But they're not just a model. You're blessed by whom? By God. And what does that even mean? It means, it's a very rich concept. It's about, there's relational clarity, right? Between you and your Creator and your Redeemer. There's relational reconciliation, and you're in right relationship with God. And it's not just about relationship, though. It's about living and experiencing the fruits and the consequences of that, which are described in the poem as you go on through Psalm 119, that things tend to go well for you, you're wise, you're able to navigate through difficult decisions and so on because you're informed by God's presence in the scriptures. You're blessed. God likes you. God's your buddy. He's for you and he's with you. Now here's what's interesting, is that after the completion of the writing and collection of the Bible, this way of teaching continued in Judaism, and this way of talking about the people whom God favors. And so this became a very common way of teaching and talking in Jewish communities. For example, in the communities of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Your pastor's going to read to you from the Dead Sea Scrolls. What'd you do Sunday, right? We read from the Dead Sea Scrolls, all of us together. So the community that produced the Dead Sea Scrolls, it was a very, very eccentric, unique community of Jewish people who were so convinced the whole rest of Judaism was going to hell in a handbasket, they withdrew to the desert, took their Bibles with them, wrote a whole bunch of weird literature, and just prayed for everyone else to be destroyed and go to hell except themselves, right? And you can go online, you can read the literature that they wrote. One of the scrolls has a whole scroll that actually, it sounds like you're reading the book of Proverbs, but it's stuff that they wrote. And it's very interesting. And lo and behold, how do they perceive themselves and talk about themselves? What are the ideals of this Dead Sea Scrolls community? They say, blessed is the one with a pure heart, who doesn't slander with his tongue. Blessed are those who adhere to the commands of the Torah, who don't adhere to perverted paths. Blessed are those who rejoice in wisdom, who don't run into paths of folly. Blessed are those who search for wisdom with pure hands and don't pursue her with a treacherous heart. Blessed is the man who attains wisdom and walks in the law of the Most High. And if you didn't know it, you would think you're reading in the Bible somewhere. We're holding up, but of course, this is a community of people that believes they're the only ones who are actually living like this, right? And that everyone else is just screwed. And so that for them, this is a way of holding up their highest ideals and a way of talking about how we are among these blessed ones whom God favors because we're the ones who are doing this. Go one step further, and this is the last example that I'll show you, but it's really interesting. There was one of the most famous Jewish teachers from about 150 years before Jesus lived. His name was Jesus too. Jesus ben Sira, Jesus the son of Sira. And he wrote a famous collection of teachings and reflections called The Wisdom of Ben Sira, and you can go read it today. It was preserved in Jewish communities and Christian communities, and one of his most famous poems is a collection of blessings. Jesus, pronouncing blessings, 100 years before Jesus pronounced his 9 blessings, right? And look at how he intros this. He says, there are 9 whom I would call blessed. A 10th my tongue proclaims. Blessed is the man who can rejoice in his children. Blessed is the man who lives to see the downfall of his foes. Blessed is the one who doesn't sin with his tongue. Blessed is the one who doesn't serve an inferior. Blessed is the one who finds a friend. Blessed is the one who speaks to attentive listeners. Greatest is the one who finds wisdom, and none is superior to the one who fears the Lord. Now, as you read through that list, there's a whole bunch of it you go, oh yeah, that kind of sounds like the Bible to me. You know, you don't sin with your tongue and you fear the Lord and find wisdom and that kind of thing. But do you see some other things going on here in these blessings? If we're holding up this ideal and we're saying these are the one that God favors, these are the ones whom God is with and experience the presence and success of God's presence in their lives, so look at the last blessing. Blessed is the one who's important so that when they speak, people want to listen to them. That's interesting. So you know that you're blessed and God is with you and for you if people think that you're important and want to listen to what you have to say. Go up just a couple. Blessed is the one who doesn't serve an inferior. Now, you don't need to know much about Roman culture except to know that it's very cutthroat. It is all about honor and shame and so where you are in the social hierarchy. So you're blessed if you know that you never have to humble yourself and actually serve someone who's of a lower social status than you. That's how you know God is with you. Well, that's interesting. That doesn't sound like something Jesus would say at all, right? It actually seems to me that that's actually the kind of thing that Jesus loved to obliterate and deconstruct, right? How oppressive that whole worldview is. But here's a Jewish respected teacher. Here you go. Blessed is the man who lives to see the downfall of his foes. This is an individual whose success in career or whatever means that no one can stand up to this person, and it's just success, and everyone who comes against him is defeated and undermined in some way. So how do you know that God's with you and God's for you? Because you win. You win. You win at everything that you do. Do you see what's happening here? So we've got some Bible, but this is also a set of blessings from one of the most famous Jewish teachers before Jesus that's fully immersed itself in the value system of the world, in which everything is about status, am I admired, and where you are, and you never step below the person that's below you on the status scale and so on. It's about them trying to get on the ladder up to you and so on. And this is the world that Jesus lives in. This is the imaginative cultural world that our poor fishermen and sick, hurting, insignificant people who flock to Jesus when he announces the good news, this is what fills their minds. And Jesus, the first thing he says to them is a set of 9 blessings. And so you hear the first bless and you're like, okay, oh, brilliant. Of course, Jesus, you're a Jewish teacher. You're going to talk about the healthy, wealthy, and wise and how God's with them. And maybe you'll help us get there, Jesus, right? And that's exactly what Jesus does not do. Do you see that here? It's exactly what he doesn't do.
Exactly what he doesn't do. And in this rockin' scenario, understand this is going to rock in a whole lot of ways, because in this build-up, this is who the makeup is, and then they expect him to also overthrow this challenge that he has, and we know from the story that that doesn't happen either. I like that he's so. Let's be fair in the balance. Let's make sure that we make this clear. Is that he is talking about Yeshua ben Sira, real guy. Yes, those are his. And I wrote down these are self-declared blessings that I'm going to declare these because I can make these statements, and he does. And I think Yeshua HaMashiach, Yeshua the Messiah, comes and says, no, that's not how it goes. And he flips the upside down in the teaching gets. If you didn't think that if you took Yeshua ben Sira out of the statement and took those same deals with a little word tweakage and threw it up for church, and you said we don't have churches that do that, if you didn't see that, you can just sit back and grab another perspective. I said that is sadly enough, we're doing the same bloody thing, okay, and that causes problems. Because it's an upside down statement. I did like that when God is bestowing the blessings on you, we're going to get to that he says, and with you, you're living through what did he say? Fruits and consequences. Interesting coin of phrase. Mackie's very good at that. Is that living through the fruits and the consequences. And I went, yeah, because that's what God does. He lives with you through the fruits and the consequences. He's not always, especially on the consequence part. There's a few wonderful stories of people that have consequences changed. Those are for his purposes, whatever they are. They will always be for his glory, meaning because they're going to be for his purposes. Whether we see it or not, it's a different story, but it's going to be to have his end show up. Is that fair? And not necessarily for that. And that number is still very small in relation to what our life and general consequences are and what we have to live through. Blessing. So I looked up blessing. It was one of those fun things. This is the Greek Hebrew game, okay? I look up at the word in Greek because you're looking at the Septuagint and that kind of piece you're looking, but you realize you need to remember that even though we have a Hebrew Matthew, but that said, even if you were stuck in the Greek, that one, Jesus isn't Greek, two, he's not speaking Greek, and three, the audience that he isn't speaking Greek. I might get into discussion and entertain that fun thought that it could be Aramaic, which is Jewish with Yiddish, or it's a mishmash, right? But Aramaic, which is very Hebrew, okay, a Jewish Hebrew, okay, and is speaking Hebrew. So the concepts and thoughts that he's bringing them, and he's bringing God's concepts. Because understand, he's not rewriting, he's bringing that concept. He says, look, you saw this in Torah, you saw this in the writings, you saw this in the prophets, and I'm bringing this forward. And this blessing point, we already know, like Tim says, he goes back, it's in the Psalms, okay? So this comes back. Now, the Greek side says blessings bring you, what did it say? Happy. It's like blissful, okay? As actually, I think the word that pulls up, if you translate the word, blissful comes up, okay? In Mackios, I think is the Greek. And it's blissful, okay? But you go and look up the Hebrew concept behind blessing, and you'll find it's the honor bestowed from God. It's coming from God. We, in our prayers, try to reflect that back to Him. In our actions, try to reflect that blessing back, but it's bestowed on Him. This isn't His directed thing, okay? And if you take that thought and you take the words that they're said, that God, instead of happy is somebody, right? Happy are those, because you go, it doesn't even work. That is so twistedly bizarre. You go, well, because it's weird and then it must be true. And you go, no, because if you go back and look at the Hebrew, it says, okay, God honors the man that honors one who is. God honors. A suggestion that you go back and look at, let me see if I can pull this up. If you can look at the blessings. Let me see if I can do this. I think I can. I think I can right here. Here we go. Okay, just for fun. Let's do this. Here we go. Okay. God honors the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. God honors those that mourn, for they shall be comforted. God honors the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. God honors those which hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. God honors the merciful, for they shall obtain. I'll put in God's mercy. God honors those of pure in heart, for they shall see God. God honors the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. God honors they that are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. God honors you when men revile you, persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad. Great is your reward in heaven, for the persecuted the prophets before you. Where are we? Here. Okay. So flip that upside down. And this is what they're hearing. They're not hearing happy. They're hearing God honors us. God cares about us. These are the cast-offs, the broken, the ones that or the day laborer that's working day to day, doing his job, not wrong. That's just his life, right? Day labor. Okay. They are us. We are them. God says. A lot of those are focused, if they're focused on God, right? It's a good point. It's a struggle and a challenge to go with, because I don't see anybody that's rising up and pushing over another foreign government that's rising up and da-da-da. It says that's God's part in this. I see where his kingdom is being built on. His kingdom's being built from these people. And I think we want to assume roles to take on God's roles in things. And I think this bears challenge for us to think about. It's just something to chew on. I like those things to chew on. Okay. Chew on that. Go back, read them again. Read a lot of these, the blessings in the Psalms, Proverbs. Read them and look at them as God's to you. Okay. And if you look at that, I think you'll look at them from a deeper, more from a different perspective. I think it enriches, because you're not looking for happiness and sorrow and happiness and mourning. It is, no, I'm looking for God there, and God's looking to meet you there in that, and with that comes His kingdom. And I think that's an amazing and life-altering perspective to things. Okay. Next week, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not sure. Let's go remember all the links to everything that we've watched, the video, the clips. They're in the description. Okay. And TheDustyFeet.com. So I will be posting on there what's going on in the next weeks. I hope to be up next week, because I think I can drag it out to not tear the studio down, and we'll cover it up. I'm hoping that something special is going to happen before that. I've said it before. We're trying to get the logistics out between us. We're in 2 different countries trying to make this happen. We're halfway around the globe, and on opposite sides. We're like this on the globe, right? So opposite sides and north-south. But if we can make this work, it'll be cool. But we'll see. After that, they tear down. I don't know what my new place is going to be like. I don't know what the internet's going to be like, which is going to be a challenge. Hopefully I can get it up, back and going, and then we'll just be a hiccup and maybe not even miss a week. Maybe not. But I'll put it on TheDustyFeet.com. Do that. Maybe I'll post something on Facebook too, for the Facebook folks. But we'll post something to try to put an update on things, because I don't know what's coming up. You're getting a glimpse by this live thing behind me. The green screen is gone. So not gone, but I mean, we're not using it, and I hope not to. I use it again only for special, some interesting and unusual occasions. But so you're getting, again, a glimpse into the future a little bit. So thanks for hanging. Go back now, sit at the Master's feet, read the blessings, and realize that, yes, the audience are those broken people. The disciples are those people. Are you, remember, because I say we are them and they are us. I'm not taking theirs. I can say I am one of them. And I hope that you're one of them too. Okay? So have a nice week. Hopefully I'll see you next week. I've had a wonderful time tonight on The Dusty Feet.